Have you ever made a decision that seemed completely logical in the moment, but looking back, you wonder what on earth you were thinking? We've all been there. That investment that seemed foolproof until it wasn't. That relationship you stayed in far too long despite all the warning signs. That career path you chose because it was safe, even though your heart was pulling you elsewhere. What if I told you these weren't just random mistakes, but predictable patterns wired into your mind by thousands of years of evolution? Today, we're diving deep into how your mind, specifically what Swiss psychologist Carl Jung would call your unconscious, tricks you into making decisions that work against your best interests. I've spent years studying Jung's work and modern decision psychology, and I've noticed something remarkable. The same mental traps appear over and over again in our lives. These aren't just abstract theories. These are practical insights that can transform how you make choices every single day. In this guide, I'll break down the 5 most powerful ways your mind deceives you, according to Jungian psychology, and most importantly, how to catch these tricks before they lead you astray. By the end, you'll have practical tools to make clearer, more aligned decisions that actually serve your highest good. But before we jump in, I should mention, this isn't about becoming perfectly rational. Jung himself would be the first to tell you that's impossible. Instead, this is about developing a relationship with your unconscious mind so you can work with it rather than having it work against you. Let's dive in. Number 1. The shadow self. How your denied traits drive your worst decisions. Imagine you're at work and there's a colleague who drives you absolutely crazy. Something about their personality just gets under your skin in a way you can't quite explain. Maybe they're overly confident, or perhaps they seek attention in ways that make you cringe. According to Jung, what's happening here is actually fascinating. You're encountering your shadow. The shadow is Jung's term for the part of yourself that you've rejected, denied, or never developed. It contains all the traits you've been taught are unacceptable, or that you've decided don't fit your self-image. The twist is, those denied parts don't just disappear. They go underground, influencing your decisions in ways you're completely blind to. Here's where things get interesting. The qualities that trigger you most in others are often the very qualities living in your shadow. Jung called this projection, when we unconsciously place disowned parts of ourselves onto other people. That's why your reaction to certain people can feel so disproportionate and emotionally charged. So how does this lead to bad decisions? In 3 critical ways. First, when you're triggered by someone, you're actually reacting to a disowned part of yourself. This means your judgment becomes clouded by emotion rather than seeing the situation clearly. That promotion you turned down because you couldn't stand working with a particular person? You might have been reacting to your shadow, not making a rational career choice. Second, your shadow holds tremendous energy and potential that you're cutting yourself off from. Maybe you pride yourself on being nice and agreeable, but this means your assertive side has been pushed into your shadow. When faced with situations that require standing your ground, you'll likely make decisions that undermine your own needs and boundaries. Third, and perhaps most significantly, your shadow seeks expression one way or another. When denied conscious expression, it tends to erupt in impulsive decisions, self-sabotage, or uncharacteristic behavior that seemingly comes out of nowhere. This happens more often than you might think. When someone rejects their creative or spontaneous side for decades, focusing only on being logical and controlled, that denied energy doesn't disappear. Eventually, that suppressed creative energy may erupt in a sudden, dramatic decision that seems completely out of character, like quitting a stable job to pursue a risky venture without proper preparation. The denied shadow finally demands expression, often in ways that create chaos rather than constructive change. So how do you catch your shadow before it tricks you into a bad decision? You can start by paying attention to your emotional triggers. When you have an unusually strong reaction to someone, pause and reflect. Ask yourself what quality in this person you're really reacting to, and consider whether this quality might exist in you in some form that you're not acknowledging. The patterns in your impulsive decisions often reveal shadow material seeking expression. When you notice yourself repeatedly making similar impulsive choices in a particular area of life, your shadow might be involved. Another powerful approach is what we might call shadow dialogue, giving voice to the parts of yourself you've rejected or try to hide from others. This creates a space for these disowned aspects to express themselves constructively before they hijack your decisions in destructive ways. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate your shadow. That's impossible. The goal is integration. When you can acknowledge these disowned parts of yourself, they no longer need to sabotage your decisions from the background. As Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Number 2, the persona trap, making decisions based on who you think you should be. Picture this, you're at a crossroads in your career. Option A feels exciting but uncertain. It's what you'd choose if no one were watching. Option B is impressive on paper. It's what would look good on your LinkedIn profile and what your parents would brag about at dinner parties. Which do you choose? Surprisingly often, we choose option B, and it leads us straight into what I call the persona trap. The persona, in Jung's framework, is the social mask we wear. It's the version of ourselves we present to the world, our professional identity, our social media presence, the role we play in our family. Jung described it as a kind of mask designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. Now, the persona itself isn't the problem. We all need one to function in society. The problem arises when we mistake the mask for who we truly are and make life-altering decisions to serve the mask rather than our authentic selves. This leads to what I call Instagram life syndrome, where the decisions you make are driven more by how they'll be perceived than by what actually brings you fulfillment. The job you take because it sounds impressive. The car you buy that stretches your finances but projects success. The relationship you stay in because it looks perfect from the outside. This happens frequently in professional settings where someone builds their entire identity around a prestigious career. When they realize they're profoundly unhappy in that role, they often can't bring themselves to make a change. The questions arise: who would I be without this identity, and what would people think? The result is often years of unnecessary suffering before finding the courage to reconstruct an identity based on authentic desires rather than social expectations. The persona trap tricks you by conflating external validation with internal fulfillment. It hijacks your decision-making process by asking, "How will this look?" instead of "How will this feel?" or "Is this right for me?" So how do you avoid falling into this trap when making important decisions? You might begin by considering what I call the deathbed perspective. When facing a significant choice, imagine yourself at the end of your life looking back. Ask yourself whether you'll be glad you made this particular decision. This viewpoint often cuts through surface-level persona concerns and connects you to what's truly important in the larger context of your life journey. Another approach is developing awareness around your motivations. Notice when you're about to make a decision primarily because of how others will perceive you rather than how aligned it is with your authentic self. This simple awareness can be powerful enough to shift your priorities. You might also benefit from intentionally developing different aspects of who you are beyond your primary social role. When your sense of self isn't dependent on any single identity, you become more resilient against the persona trap, and more able to make decisions from an authentic place. Jung believed that the journey to wholeness requires differentiating between your persona and your authentic self. He wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is." When you can see your persona as just one aspect of yourself rather than your whole identity, you free yourself to make decisions aligned with your true values. Number 3, mistaking complexes for intuition. When your emotional triggers hijack your choices. Have you ever had a strong gut feeling about something that turned out to be completely wrong? Maybe you were absolutely certain someone couldn't be trusted, only to discover later they were perfectly trustworthy. Or perhaps you felt an overwhelming pull toward a particular choice that ended up being disastrous. What you experienced wasn't intuition, it was a complex. In Jungian psychology, complexes are emotionally charged groups of ideas or images that cluster around a particular theme. They form through our early life experiences and tend to operate autonomously, like little sub-personalities within our psyche. When triggered, they can completely take over our decision-making process while disguising themselves as gut feelings or intuition. This is one of the mind's most cunning tricks because it feels like clarity in the moment. The emotional charge of a complex creates a false sense of certainty that can be utterly convincing. Consider how this plays out with financial decisions. Someone who grew up experiencing financial instability or witnessed their parents struggle with money might develop a complex around financial risk. Whenever they face an opportunity to invest or take a calculated financial risk, they might experience an overwhelming feeling of dread and just know it's a bad idea. They may interpret this as financial intuition protecting them, when in reality it's a complex formed around early experiences with financial insecurity. Such a complex can cost a person numerous opportunities for growth and prosperity over the years. How can you tell the difference between a genuine intuition and a complex masquerading as one? True intuition typically arrives with a sense of calm clarity, whereas complexes tend to generate anxiety, emotional intensity, or a sense of urgency. You might notice thoughts like, "I need to decide right now," when a complex is at work. Genuine intuition usually presents itself as quiet knowing without excessive mental chatter. In contrast, complexes often trigger a stream of thoughts that all seem to support one conclusion, creating a closed loop of self-reinforcing logic. Another distinction is that true intuition generally feels steady over time, while the certainty from a complex tends to fluctuate, especially when the emotional trigger subsides. If your conviction wavers significantly depending on your emotional state, a complex might be involved. So how do you prevent complexes from hijacking your important decisions? You can begin by becoming familiar with your personal complexes. These often reveal themselves through recurring patterns, situations where you consistently have exaggerated emotional reactions or make similar mistakes repeatedly. When facing a decision with strong emotional charge, ask yourself, is this feeling familiar? Have I felt exactly this way before in similar situations? Another effective approach is practicing what I call the sacred pause. When you feel an overwhelming certainty about a decision, especially one accompanied by strong emotion, deliberately delay your choice. Give yourself permission to wait before deciding. This creates space for your complex to settle and allows your higher reasoning to engage. You might also benefit from engaging in dialogue with the activated parts of yourself. Ask the feeling directly, "What are you trying to protect me from?" This compassionate inquiry can reveal the core fear or belief driving the complex, giving you valuable information without letting it control your decision. Jung understood that complexes themselves aren't the problem. They're actually important messengers from our unconscious. The problem comes when we mistake their urgent messages for objective truth. As he put it, When an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside as fate. By learning to recognize when a complex is activated, you can extract its wisdom without letting it dictate your choices. Number 4. Collective unconscious pressures. When ancient patterns sabotage modern choices. Imagine you're considering a major life decision that goes against conventional wisdom, perhaps choosing an unconventional career path, challenging a family tradition, or pursuing a lifestyle that raises eyebrows in your community. Even if you consciously believe it's the right choice, you might feel an inexplicable weight of anxiety or resistance. You might find yourself inexplicably drawn back to the conventional path despite your conscious desires. This is where you're encountering what Jung called the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is perhaps Jung's most profound contribution to psychology. The idea that beyond our personal unconscious lies a deeper layer of the psyche we all share. This layer contains archetypes, universal patterns and images that have evolved with humanity over millennia. And they exert a powerful influence on our decisions, often without our awareness. These archetypal patterns create unconscious pressure to conform to roles and stories that have been reinforced throughout human history. The hero, the caregiver, the ruler, the sage, and many more. When we make choices that conflict with these deep patterns, we often experience inexplicable resistance or anxiety. This manifests in many life choices that go against traditional paths. Consider someone who consciously chooses to remain child-free to focus on career and adventure. Despite clarity about this decision, they might find themselves experiencing mysterious depression and doubt as they age. From a Jungian perspective, this could reflect pressure from the mother archetype, a pattern so ancient and powerful in the collective unconscious that diverging from it can trigger profound internal conflict, even when the divergent path is authentically right for the individual. Another way the collective unconscious tricks us is through what Jung called participation mystique, unconsciously absorbing the values and beliefs of our social group without question. This explains why even the most independent-minded people can fall in line with their families' or culture's expectations when making major life decisions. So how do you recognize when collective patterns are influencing your choices in unhelpful ways? You might begin by noticing when a decision feels strangely heavy with meaning beyond its practical implications. When a choice feels laden with a sense of profound rightness or wrongness that seems disproportionate to its actual impact on your life. Archetypal energies may be at play beneath the surface. Another approach is examining your inner shoulds, especially those you can't quite explain rationally. When you catch yourself thinking, "I should want children," or "I should take over the family business," without clear personal desire driving these thoughts, you might be encountering collective patterns speaking through your psyche rather than your authentic self. Jung also believed that dreams and imagination provide direct access to the collective unconscious. Paying attention to recurring symbols or themes in your dreams, especially around major decisions, can reveal the archetypal energies influencing your choices from below the threshold of awareness. The goal isn't to ignore these collective patterns. They contain ancient wisdom accumulated over millennia of human experience. Rather, the aim is to engage with them consciously instead of being unconsciously ruled by them. As Jung eloquently put it, freedom is doing what you like, independence is doing what you ought. One practical approach involves imaginative dialogue with the archetypes most relevant to your decision. If you're contemplating a career change, you might imagine a conversation with the warrior or creator archetype, asking, "What wisdom do you have for me? What fears are you triggering? How can I honor your energy while still making the choice that's right for my unique situation?" Number 5. Ignoring synchronicity, missing the guidance, hidden in meaningful coincidences. Have you ever experienced a strange coincidence that felt meaningful, like thinking of an old friend right before they call, or repeatedly encountering the same obscure symbol just when it's relevant to a decision you're facing? Most of us dismiss these occurrences as random chance, and that's exactly how our rational mind tricks us into missing one of our most powerful decision-making tools. Jung coined the term synchronicity to describe these meaningful coincidences, events connected by meaning rather than causality. He believed they were communications from the unconscious, offering guidance, especially when we're at important crossroads. The problem is, we've been conditioned to trust only linear, logical thinking, what Jung would call the conscious mind. This leads us to ignore the subtle nudges, coincidences, and patterns that might be offering exactly the guidance we need. This phenomenon occurs regularly in major life decisions. Consider someone weighing whether to move to a new city for a job opportunity. As they contemplate this decision, they begin noticing references to this city appearing in unexpected places. Perhaps they repeatedly encounter people wearing that city's sports team merchandise, or books they randomly select are set there, or songs mentioning the city play at pivotal moments during their decision-making process. The rational mind tends to dismiss these as meaningless coincidences. But when such patterns emerge around significant life choices, they might contain valuable guidance from the unconscious that conventional decision-making processes miss entirely. The trick here isn't that your mind misses these coincidences, it's that your rational mind actively discounts their significance. This dismissal makes perfect sense from an evolutionary perspective. Our logical brain evolved to keep us safe through predictable patterns, not to recognize subtle, meaningful connections. So how do you catch this trick and incorporate synchronicity into your decision-making? You might begin by simply noticing coincidences without immediately dismissing them. Consider keeping track of meaningful coincidences, especially those that occur around important decisions. Over time, you may start to recognize patterns that provide insight into your life's direction. Developing symbolic thinking can also be valuable, as synchronicities often communicate through symbols rather than literal messages. When a coincidence stands out to you, pause and reflect. If this coincidence were trying to communicate something about my current situation, what might that message be? Another approach involves engaging imaginatively with the coincidence itself. You might visualize the coincidence as a messenger and inwardly ask, what insight are you trying to bring to my awareness? This creative engagement can reveal meanings that logical analysis might miss. The key is finding balance. You don't want to base major life decisions solely on coincidences, but neither should you ignore the wisdom they might contain. Jung's approach wasn't to reject rationality, but to complement it with attention to the unconscious. As Jung wrote, synchronicity reveals the meaningful connection between the subjective and objective world. When you can integrate both conscious reasoning and unconscious guidance through synchronicity, your decisions become more holistic and aligned with your deeper purpose. We've covered 5 powerful ways your mind tricks you into making bad decisions. Your shadow self drives unconscious reactions from the background. The persona trap leads you to choose appearance over authenticity. Emotional complexes masquerade as intuition while actually reflecting old wounds. Collective unconscious patterns create invisible pressure toward conformity, and your rational mind dismisses meaningful synchronicities that might offer guidance. The common thread running through all these tricks is disconnection. Specifically, the disconnection between your conscious and unconscious mind. Jung's entire framework revolves around the idea that wholeness and better choices come through integration. This integration doesn't happen overnight. It's a lifelong process Jung called individuation. becoming more fully yourself by bringing the unconscious into consciousness. But even small steps toward this integration can dramatically improve your decision-making. So what does this integration look like in practice? You might begin by cultivating what Jung called active imagination, a practice of dialoguing with different parts of your psyche. Before making important decisions, create space to hear from these different inner voices. Consider what your shadow might say about this choice, or your authentic self beneath the persona. Explore what wisdom your complexes might be trying to share, despite their emotional intensity. Paying attention to your dreams, especially around major decisions, can also provide valuable insights. Jung saw dreams as direct communications from the unconscious, offering perspectives your conscious mind might miss. Noting patterns or symbols in your dreams related to choices you're facing can provide guidance from deeper parts of yourself. Another approach involves what Jung called amplification. When you notice an emotional reaction, a coincidence, or a dream image related to a decision, you can deepen your understanding by exploring associated images and ideas. Asking yourself what this element reminds you of, or what deeper theme might be at play, can reveal connections your conscious mind wouldn't make on its own. Jung also emphasized seeking balance between opposites. When torn between two options, there might be a third way that honors the wisdom in both choices. The psyche naturally moves toward wholeness when we can hold the tension between opposing forces rather than simply choosing one over the other. Finally, remember that the goal isn't to eliminate these unconscious influences. That's impossible. The goal is to develop a working relationship with them so they can inform your decisions rather than sabotage them. In Jung's words, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. The same applies to decision-making. Knowing the ways your own mind tricks you is the best method for making decisions that truly serve your highest good. So the next time you face an important choice, take a moment to consider, which of these 5 tricks might be influencing me now? What parts of myself might I be ignoring? What wisdom might my unconscious be trying to share? Your unconscious mind isn't your enemy. It's a powerful ally if only you learn to listen. Remember, the most powerful decisions come not from the conscious mind alone, but from the integration of all parts of yourself, both the light and the shadow, the personal and the collective, the rational and the synchronistic. This integration is the true path to wisdom in your choices and ultimately to what Jung would call your most authentic life.